welcome back to another episode of Perkins Pipes, the first one of 2024 that I can actually do outside. Even though it's February, it's nice, it's 50 degrees, a little bit of breeze, nice and sunny, and if you listen carefully, you'll probably hear the sounds of children playing in our neighborhood, so everybody knows this is a good time to be out and about. So, got something I'm kind of excited to share with you today, in addition to the Peterson Professor. You know how much I love this guy, and got the traditional Prince Albert in the bowl. So let's get this guy fired up, and I'll tell you what I'm excited to talk with you about today. So, I had mentioned in one of the other videos that in addition to being a teacher of Latin, I also write, and I had mentioned my book, Latin for Dummies. Well, I've written a few more things besides that, and I want to share a little bit of that with you today. So, I've written numerous academic articles in my field of classical studies, Latin and Greek, Greco-Roman stuff. Written Latin for Dummies and some other books, some of a spiritual nature, some of other books having to do with classics. But when our children were little, I decided to write for them a book each year for their birthday. We have a son and a daughter. I was inspired by the words in the Paul Simon song, St. Judy's Comet. He's got a line in there. He said, well, if I can't sing my boy to sleep, well, it makes your famous daddy look so dumb. And I do a lot of professional writing, a lot of professional speaking. I kind of thought the same thing. I thought, man, if I can't write books for my children, then what's the point of all this other academic writing? So I want to share with you some of those books today. One in particular. If you like this kind of thing, talking about books, the finer things of life, all along with a pipe, we certainly invite you to subscribe. We'd love to have you part of the channel. And I'm going to be asking you something toward the end of this video, so stay with the video, hang on till the end, because I'm going to be asking you something to put in the comments section. So I'm not going to bring out all of them, but I'm going to share with you a few of the ones that I wrote my son and my daughter. And I'm going to talk about one of them today. So, well, I'll go ahead and tell you what the question is going to be. The question is going to be, which of these other books would you like to hear me talk about? So like I said, I'm going to share with you several of them, talk about one of them today, and then let me know in the comments which of these others you would like to hear about. So this one, it's called Pheidippides Allen Long, and it is about a young boy who goes to Greece, ends up getting transported back to ancient Greece, and connects with the famous runner Pheidippides, and has grand adventures in running and racing, and of course saving the world. That was for my son. This is a Boy Bale Wolf. This is the famous Beowulf poem, originally written in Old English, and I rewrote it in ballad stanza. So a lot of heroic action and fighting of dragons and all that sort of thing in ballad stanzas. So a Boy Bale Wolf. We've got, The Guard at the Tomb. Illustration for this was done by a friend of mine. And it's about a young man who grows up, wants to be part of the Roman army. He does. He goes off and joins the Roman army and then ends up as a guard, one of the guards at the tomb of Jesus. Guard at the tomb. Then we've got Knight to C3. This is the time when my son was big into chess, elementary school. He'd just gotten into chess. And it's about a young boy named David Andrews, a typical fourth grader. So my son must have been in the fourth grade at the time. And about him playing chess. And also some other adventures he has with students at his school and learning some important lessons along the way. Knight to C3. This is the Legend of Aeneas. Some of you may be familiar with the epic Latin poem, the Aeneid. Like the Iliad and the Odyssey were in Greek. The Roman poet Virgil wrote the Aeneid in Latin. And this is the entire story of the Aeneid, but through the eyes of one of the young characters in the Aeneid, the young son of the hero Aeneas. So the Legend of Aeneas. And we've got, this was a good one, the Steel Centurion. This is, again, another one set in ancient Italy, and turns out that a centurion, a blacksmith builds a centurion that comes to life and is able to fight in the army. So, the Steel Centurion. This was a fun one. It's called The Space Between. Let's read it back here. It says, an ancient manuscript may hold the key to unlocking the secrets of reality itself. When a 19th century scientist tries to use that key, he unleashes a disaster he could never have imagined. His only hope for saving the world is to enter once again the space between. And it's really a 19th century kind of science fiction, think like War of the Worlds or something like that, based on an actual manuscript and something that dates back to Greco-Roman antiquity. This was a great fun one called Short Stories. And this has all kinds of short stories in it. We've got action adventure, we've got some fan fiction, we've got tall tale, we've got space, we've got just all kinds of really cool stuff. So a collection of short stories there. And then the last one I'll bring out of the books I wrote him, The Sword of Damocles. Of course, people are familiar with that story, The Sword of Damocles. Again, ties back into the ancient world. But involves the mafia and CIA agents and what my son likes to call a 5-paragraph fist fight. So that was a fun one. Then the ones I wrote my daughter, or some of the ones I wrote my daughter. This is Cherry, the Sawdust Girl. This was when she was very young, had a friend do the art for it. And I actually made her a doll, stuffed doll, that was stuffed with cherry wood shavings, cherry wood just, from a tree that we had cut down at my wife's father's, so our daughter's papa's place. Then also for her, Sally and the Sky Ponies. Again, a friend did the art, and the mother of one of my students actually made 2 stuffed plush horses to go with this. About a little girl who has adventures with Sky Ponies at night. Arwen of Blackwood Hall. So our daughter was getting a little bit older at this time. And this says, Lady Arwen is proud when her husband, Sir Alfred, is called by the king to help defend the kingdom. But when a strange guest enters her home, Blackwood Hall, her world suddenly changes. So a big action-adventure story with a lady who is very good with the bow and arrow. Actually, our daughter was enjoying bow and arrow at that time. Another one that features a wonderful, true female heroine, Swim to Freedom. It's the fictionalized story of the real Roman girl named Cloelia, who led a bunch of Roman children to safety after they had been kidnapped in war about the year 509 BC. So that was a fun one. Then this is The Prophecy. It was a sci-fi book. Features adventures on other planets and lots of just really fantastic and kind of amazing sorts of things. Then there was The 18th Hole. Sandy McIntosh is a girl who likes to explore, especially the attic in her grandfather's house. What she discovers there one afternoon becomes a part of her life in a way she could never have imagined as she navigates the ups and downs of school, friends, and growing up. A lot of personal references to golf here. If I end up sharing this one at some point, we'll talk about those, but a lot of personal references in there about a young girl learning to play golf. And the one I'm going to share with you today is The Girl from Binfield. So think about those others. If you want to back the video up, do that. But I'd love to hear from you if there's any of those others you would like to hear a little bit more about. You may be saying, well, I don't want to hear about them. I just want to buy them. You can't do that. So when I wrote these books for my children, at some point my wife said, hey, you should publish those to a broader audience. And I asked her children, I said, what do you think about that? And they said no. And I've asked them more than once over the years, and they've always said no. They really like the idea that these books were just for them. So at this point, until they change their mind, these books are just for them. But I would like to share some of them with you. And having a hard time with the lighter here with the wind. There we go. So I mentioned in a couple of my other videos, my favorite British poet is Alexander Pope, who lived from 1688 to 1744. And he lived in the area of Binfield in England. Well, I discovered the most wonderful poem by Pope. And he had written it about a little girl that he knew when she was 7 years old. And so I wrote this book for my daughter when she turned 7. Now here's Pope's poem. Here's Pope's original poem. Wit's queen, if what the poets sing be true, and beauty's goddess childhood never knew. Pallas, they say, sprung from the head of Jove, full grown, and from the sea the queen of love. But had they, miss, your wit and beauty seen, Venus and Pallas both had children been. They, from the sweetness of that radiant look, a copy of young Venus might have took. And from those pretty things you speak have told, how Pallas talked when she was 7 years old. So I knew I had to use that as the basis for a book for my daughter when she turned 7. So keeping with Alexander Pope's rhyming couplets, I wrote this poem at the beginning of the book. The book is not a poem. The book is a young adult novel. But this is the introduction, or the poem at the beginning that I wrote to my daughter. Had Alexander Pope known you, my dear, he would have written for each passing year another poem praising every grace that God has given, beginning with your face, which fills a room with laughter and delight, eclipsing even the sun's own brilliant light. The rolling years would see new poems penned, for of your charms there never is an end. Your quick, sharp mind, your heart so full of love, all these direct our thanks to God above. Yet most I thank him for the great gift I hold of you, my sweet. Now you are 7 years old. So the story, and I will say it turned out to be one of my daughter's favorites. She asked me to read it more than once to her. Revolves around a young girl named Polly Spencer. I'll just read you a little bit at the beginning. Polly Spencer loved the time just before bed. She enjoyed all the other times of day, too, but her favorite time was when the family gathered around the fireplace and her father read a story. She always tried to sit close to him, which was not easy. 3 older brothers and 2 older sisters jostled for a position closest to the fire, but by a bit of persistent wiggling, Polly could usually work her way through them to a spot by her father's feet. So the father reads stories to them, and the little girl Polly has a great imagination. And while the others have to work on the farm, Polly sometimes likes to play a little bit more than work, and sometimes this runs her into some trouble with her mother. But her father usually indulges her and tells her wonderful stories of mythology and shares poetry. Well, it turns out that the Pope family are neighbors. And so at one point, Polly gets to read some of Alexander's poems, and she really likes them a lot. She gets to spend some time over at Alexander Pope's house. His mother introduces her to writing, and she starts to write some poems and things of her own. And then she ends up getting to take a trip to London for the debut of a play that Alexander Pope in real life had written the introduction for. It's Joseph Addison's play, Cato, a Tragedy, which interestingly enough was performed at the request of George Washington for his men on the night before Valley Forge. So anyhow, she gets to go to the play. She sees the debut of the play. She has great dreams of becoming a poet, which was no easy thing for a woman back in that era. But she ends up doing that, and she becomes either a playwright or a poet. I've actually forgotten myself. But young Polly becomes one or the other. And then, let's see here. She becomes a playwright. I had her become a playwright. And so she becomes a playwright and has a daughter of her own. And when her daughter turns 7, she shows her the poem that Alexander Pope had written for her when she was 7. And of course, the poem that I had mentioned earlier. So I mention all these in addition to, again, please pop a comment if there's any books you'd like to hear about more, or more from that one there, The Girl from Binfield. Happy to talk about any of these. But I bring this up for another reason. I write. That's what I like to do. In addition to teaching, I like to write. And so I use that gift to bless my children. What gifts do you have that you use already to bless your family or your friends? Maybe you're a woodworker. Maybe you're a metal worker. Maybe you like to sew. Maybe you like to cook. Maybe you like to make pipes. Maybe you make one for a friend. What do you like to do? What do you do that you use that gift to share it with others? Or if you haven't thought about it that way, what could you do? What are some of the gifts that you have that you could use to bless your family and friends? So as Alexander Pope, as Malcolm Guite likes to say, I do these little things in order at last to do nothing. Or as I like to say in Latin, Parva ago, ut tandem, nihil agam. Have a wonderful day.